Alright, I am back with another video, and I know what you're thinking. You saw the thumbnail, you've seen the title, you're thinking, oh, but what the hell are you doing? Listen, I know people's initial knee-jerk reaction is going to be that Arcane Archer does not make sense for Gale. But hear me out on this one. I think I've got some pretty interesting justifications as to why this could be a potential route to go down that would make sense for the character. As well as the fact that, I could just make Bladesinger Wizard Gale, but I kind of already made a really decent Bladesinger Wizard build 2 videos ago, and since Arcane Archer was the second highest voted one on the poll that I did the other day, I wanted to get this one done, and the more that I thought about it, I thought, I don't know, I just don't think Arcane Archer fits laezel, and a lot of people seem to agree. I've got a different plan for laezel that I think is going to be quite interesting, that I think you guys will appreciate, and so that kind of left Arcane Archer in the lurch. But then I got thinking, well, Arcane Archer is intelligence-based. The arrows are classified as spells, each of the arrows coming from a different school of magic. Necromancy, Transmutation, even Evocation, and Abjuration as well. They're deliberately tied to schools of magic, as you can see in their descriptions, and I thought that sounds like something that Gale would have a go at. And in my other origin builds for Gale, like the one where I made him a wild magic sorcerer, which to this day is still somewhat infamous, there's this kind of idea that Gale, because he was once this master wizard, who because of the tadpole and what happened between the, the Karlach orb and Mister and all that, he lost his connection to the weave, in a way, which is why he is level 1 when we find him. He has become weaker. Now, what if, forget, right? Instead of being like, well, I guess I'm just starting from the ground up with Wizard again, or perhaps having the Karlach orb inflict him in a more sorcerous way, what if he turned to craft? What if he took all of his magic knowledge, all of his years of study into the arcane, and turned it into weaponry? Like magical weaponry that he could use to channel the weave, right? And as such, he ended up developing these arcane arrows and other interesting implements, while still retaining a little bit of his control over the over the weave. I don't know what Gale gets up to in camp, but good lord. But anyways, so yeah, basically the idea of this build is to be kind of an artificer light, using both wizardry and Arcane Archer to create magical weaponry and other things as well, like potions and grenades, in order to become a new type of wizard. A wizard it's a gun mage. It's Gun Gale, alright? Gun Gale has been a meme on this channel for a long, long time, since the early days of the streams, and like when we were talking about the origin builds originally, so you know what? We're making Gun Gale today. And I'll be honest, it bloody works. The way that we're able to weave spellcasting and the magic arrows together to actually have them synergize thanks to the equipment honestly feels like a really satisfying playstyle. Not to mention, it's also very goddamn powerful. I mean, let's be honest, we're using Sharpshooter of Arcane Archer here. We're going to be doing a lot of damage, but again, the way that I found that certain equipment can synergize with the new special shots gained from Arcane Archer, it does feel really, really interesting. And again, when you get things like curving shot and all that worked in, and again, we're gonna be kind of, emphasizing the use of the alchemy system here too, to really get that level of flavor. And of course, I would also encourage you to go and find the special types of arrows throughout the game in order to give you even more options just beyond what Arcane Archer provides. I think you can play a really fun and interesting playstyle that explores a new potential route for Gale's story. Now, don't get me wrong, I almost did Shadow Sorcerer today because Gale can get that Shadow spell slot in Act 2, but I think I'm going to save that for a certain, somewhat less stable individual. But anyways, without further ado, let's get into the build. Now, we are going to kick things off as Wizard. Usually in my origin builds, I do like to start with the character's original starting class. For Will, we did start with Warlock, and today we are going to start with Wizard for Gale. However, starting with Fighter would obviously give you Constitution saving throw proficiency. However, this build isn't actually really focused on concentration spells that much, so I would argue that it's not really necessary. I would actually prefer to start with Wizard for a certain certain proficiency that we will get from doing so, which we wouldn't normally be able to get from fighter. Now, if you're playing with Gale as an origin, he is a human, so you could change your human proficiency to this proficiency as well in order to change things up, but again, we'll talk about that more in a minute. But first off, starting off as a wizard, we're going to get a few things, namely 3 cantrips, and it's entirely up to you kind of what you want to pick here, but I would definitely recommend taking some different ranged cantrips to kind of fit the vibe of the build. First up, I'm going to be grabbing Firebolt. This is going to be our kind of first basic level arcane shot. We're going to be able to shoot a 1d10 mote of fire. We're also going to be able to gain Ray of Frost, kind of like a beam of ice, which is going to reduce our target's movement speed. Great for a ranged build, as it means they won't be able to get up to us so easily. Now, it's entirely up to you what you want your third cantrip to be. Unfortunately, Booming Blade obviously does not work with ranged attacks, so I don't really recommend that one here, unless you do want to bonk someone with your quarterstaff in a pinch, because we will have a quarterstaff available to us, but there's things like Acid Splash if you want to kind of make that your first type of grenade in quotations, Poison Spray for a similar vibe, or even Bone Chill if you want a necrotic damage attack, which I also think could be really cool. So honestly, the world's your oyster here. I'm mostly focusing on the kind of evocation magics here, but something even like True Strike could work, and I'll explain more about that later. So it's entirely up to you. We can go with Acid Splash for now. Moving on to our spell selection, here's what I've got for you. We are, as you can see, wearing clothing, so we are going to be grabbing Mage Armour for this build. We're also going to be grabbing Magic Missile as another special kind of shot type for us. This is in a similar vein to the Arcane Gunner build that I made a little while ago, where we kind of focused on force damage. This build is doing a little bit of the same, but obviously now we have Arcane Archer to help with that even more. So yeah, Magic Missile being a guaranteed thing to hit with force damage as well is really, really nice. Shield, obviously, always going to bring it for the defense, and then we have our movement options: Enhanced Sleep, Longstrider, and Featherfall to help us get around the battlefield and traverse the overworld. Honestly, I always like to pack these spells. Longstrider, once you use Longstrider all the time on things, it's hard to stop using it, but overall, I feel like this is a solid spell set for level 1. And then finally, onto the skill proficiencies. We've got a lot to work with here, actually. We're going to be doing a pretty standard wizard spread with a slight more of a focus in dexterity, because obviously pretty much all ranged weapons are dexterity focused. So let's have a look at the stats. Strength is at 8, we don't need it, we've got things like Enhanced Sleep to help with our jumping. Dexterity is at 16, as it is going to be our main attacking stat. Constitution is at 14, most people would probably like this a little bit higher, but honestly with a ranged character that's going to be staying out of the thick of it for the most part, 14 is just fine, especially since we're going to be taking mostly fighter levels with this build. Our HP is still going to be sitting pretty around 90 to 100 by the time all is said and done. Intelligence is at 16, obviously this is our main spellcasting modifier and the spell save DC for our Arcane Archer shots, so we definitely want this here. And Wisdom is at 12 for those nasty saving throws. Charisma is at 8, but feel free to bump Wisdom down to a 10 and put Charisma to a 10, or swap Charisma and Wisdom around, depending on your preference. Moving on to our skill proficiencies, Gale is a Sage, meaning that he comes with Arcana and History built in, and honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. Now, this is Companion Gale, as if you were playing as a regular Tav, so unfortunately Persuasion is locked in for him as his human skill proficiency. However, I would certainly change this to Medicine if you were starting with Fighter, otherwise Persuasion here is okay. I would obviously rather put it into something else since we did dump Charisma, but it's whatever. But the main thing we want to start with Wizard for is Medicine. Because yes, you saw the thumbnail, we're going with Transmutation Wizard today, so we can take full advantage of the alchemy system and gaining proficiency in medicine checks, so we can make that DC 15 medicine check to gain double stuff when we craft. We definitely want that. And your last skill proficiency can be whatever you like between Insight, Religion, and Investigation. I've gone with Investigation, because, you know, Gale's an inquisitive guy. Right, that's level 1. Right, I would say from this point we are going to want to get to the new stuff straight away, but I could definitely see if you want to take level 2 of Wizard here to get that subclass right away, but I feel like delaying our main fighter subclass too much is going to feel a bit more awkward in the early game to mid game, so I think we want to go straight into fighter and we'll come back for the rest later. Take these level of fighters to start building up your alchemic supplies, and then once you get that level 2 of Transmutation, go wild with the crafting. But so, we're now jumping over to Fighter, giving us access to Second Wind, allowing us to heal ourselves as a bonus action, as well as gaining a bunch of proficiencies that we want. Simple weapons, martial weapons, light armor, medium armor, and shields. Gale already gets shield proficiency as a human, but if you're playing as someone other than Gale and trying out this build, then this can help. Moving on to our fighting style. Now, you may think that obviously we're going to be choosing archery here, but no, we're going with 2-weapon fighting because, yes, we're doing dual crossbows today. I found that for this to be the best way to blend spell casting and ranged fighting, as we can fire with our offhand bonus action and cast spells with our main action. And then once we've kind of built up everything that we want to, our status effects and buffs using our spells, we can then go ham with attacking with both our action and our main and our bonus action. So yes, there is going to be a little bit of action economy chicanery with this build, which is why 2-weapon fighting is seriously going to help with that. At fighter level 2, we're going to get Action Surge, gaining an extra action once per short rest in the middle of combat. You all know what this does, it's very, very powerful, and on a build like this, it can absolutely destroy encounters. At level 3 of fighter, we are going to be able to grab our subclass, and that is obviously Arcane Archer. Arcane Archer is going to give us a ton of cool stuff to work with, including the Arcane Arrow resource, which is going to be a separate resource that we use for our arcane shots. We don't get spell slots with this, like Eldritch Knight, which, to be honest, while I can kind of see that, I think it would have been interesting for multiclassing and build making if you actually did use spell slots for the arrows and you kind of got spell slot progression like Eldritch Knight, because I think that would create a lot more synergy, but otherwise, having a unique resource is absolutely fine. We are going to get to choose a cantrip at this level, and of course I'm going to go with Guidance, because Guidance is just one of the better overall cantrips. If you've got a Cleric in your party though, you might find something like True Strike to be a bit more useful, because obviously, you can have True Strike, cast it as an action, gain advantage for your bonus action attack, which helps offset Sharpshooter's penalty. So, there you go, a potential option for you. But of course, what you've all been waiting for, we now get to choose 3 of the available arcane shots. Let's go over each option and see why we might pick any of them. So, first up, Arcane Shot Banishing Arrow. All of these will be listed as pure force damage because of the crossbow I have equipped, which is the Never Misser, which does pure force damage. So yes, the weapon you have equipped does affect the damage type of the Arcane Shot, which is kind of nice. But Arcane Shot Banishing Arrow will allow you to use Abjuration magic to potentially banish a target to the Feywild. This one doesn't do any additional damage and just inflicts banishing, so this is probably my least favourite of them all. Moving on, we've got Arcane Shot Beguiling Arrow. Deals your usual damage plus an extra 2d6 of psychic damage, and the target must succeed a saving throw or become charmed. Again, this is all against your intelligence spell save DC. We also have Arcane Shot Bursting Arrow, dealing an additional 2d6 force damage and also hitting surrounding targets within 3 meters. This absolutely is the best arrow for this build. Not only is it a damage type not often resisted, it synergizes well with the rest of the build, and that spread damage is going to synergize well with other stuff that we're going to be doing later with our equipment. Trust me, this is probably your best option and one I would absolutely prioritize. The other 2 arrows can kind of be whatever you like. Next up, Enfeebling Shot. Using necromantic magic, you can deal 2d6 extra necrotic damage, and the target must succeed a saving throw or become feeble. Feeble means that their weapon attacks will only deal half damage. Absolutely bring this one. In my personal opinion, while this one is optional, it is definitely one of the best. We have Grasping Arrow, allowing you to deal 2d6 poison damage, affecting the entity's movement speed by reducing it by 3 meters, and it will take extra slashing damage when it moves. These 3 arrows are absolutely what I would pick, and even though poison damage is often resisted and isn't exactly a good damage type and blah blah blah, we've got ways to make it better with this build, so honestly, I highly recommend this one. The other 3 arrows are Seeking Arrow, allowing you to use Divination Magic to make your arrow seek a target. The arrow will apply an additional 1d6 of force damage and can possibly apply Fairy Fire, but this arrow always hits its target, so you're sacrificing a little bit of damage for the ability to potentially inflict Fairy Fire, which can help your team, and this arrow never misses. Honestly, this one is very, very good, but with the setup that we have here, missing doesn't really happen. However, I can absolutely see why you would want to have this one, especially on Sharpshooter builds that don't want to rely so much on having to try and have advantage all the time. So Seeking Arrow is definitely worth considering. Moving on, we've got Shadow Arrow, allowing you to deal extra psychic damage and also potentially blind your target, which is very, very good. Obviously, psychic damage is not often resisted in this game, unless you're up against Steel Watchers, in which case this basically is useful all the time, because blind is a very, very good condition which can shut down a lot of enemy combatants. And finally, Piercing Arrow. This one does extra piercing damage, funnily enough, and allows you to use Transmutation magic to attack all those within a line of your shot. Each target must succeed a saving throw or take an additional 1d6 piercing damage. Honestly, this one is extremely situational. The piercing damage is more likely to be resisted than any of the other damage types that we see here, as well as having to have a specific lineup on your targets. I mean, there's a reason people prefer Fireball to Lightning Bolt. Line-based damage isn't always the best, as it is way more situational, but you never know, you might find this one useful. Personally, like I said, I would recommend Bursting Arrow, Enfeebling Arrow, and Grasping Arrow for your first 3. At Fighter level 4, we are going to get to choose our first feat of the build. And I would say at this point, you're probably going to want to grab a bump to your dexterity to make your arrows more viable. Because obviously, we only have 16 at this point, and we don't want to be taking Sharpshooter now, as we're not going to hit anything with 16 dexterity. So let's grab 18 for now. At Fighter level 5, you're going to gain access to extra attack, allowing you to an extra attack, so now we can shoot twice with our action in one turn. And at Fighter level 6, we are going to be grabbing our second feat of the build, which is going to be Sharpshooter. This allows our ranged weapon attacks to ignore high ground rules, meaning that we aren't going to be gaining disadvantage if we are below a target. We're also going to make it so that we do an additional 10 damage with every shot that we do. This includes the Arcane Arrows, but we take a -5 penalty to our attack roll to do so. But don't worry, that penalty is going to mean nothing by the time this build is said and done. Now, at Fighter level 7, you're going to gain access to Magic Arrow, allowing all of your ranged attacks to overcome resistance. This is great. This means that now with our Sharpshooter abilities, well, now piercing damage doesn't matter, which means we're always going to be doing the maximum amount of damage possible, which is kind of insane. We're also going to get Curving Shot. Whenever we miss with a magical ranged attack, we can use our bonus action to attack the next closest target with the same attack, so we can sacrifice our offhand attack for the turn to be able to guarantee our main attack hits, which for our Arcane Arrows, which are a limited resource, will feel very, very nice to do. Honestly, this class is very, very resource efficient. We're also going to get to grab another Arcane Shot here. Now, I would say you've got 5 options here. You know, basically pick your preference. We haven't taken a Psychic Damage Arrow yet, so I would probably recommend taking one of them. As much as Seeking Arrow for its guaranteed hit is really, really nice, again, I do find with this specific build setup, that guaranteed hit isn't as necessary, especially when we do have Magic Missile. Because normally, if you need to guarantee an attack to hit, it means you're picking off an enemy that's already low HP, so Magic Missile will do that very, very efficiently. So I would say Seeking Arrow is not as necessary. I would like to pick up a Psychic Damage attack, because I feel like that's a damage type that we don't have yet, and Shadow Arrow, potentially blinding targets, I think is our best bet, but of course, it is entirely up to you what you want to pick. And finally, at Fighter level 8, you are going to gain access to another feat, and at this point, it's entirely up to you kind of what you want to grab. I did use Crossbow Expert in my testing, and I do think it does have some value on this build. It allows you to make it so that whenever you are within melee range, your attack rolls are not rolled with disadvantage. This means that you would just still have advantage, because again, we will have advantage most of the time on this build. You will not have disadvantage, you will basically not have neutral vantage, I guess, at close range. And also your piercing shot can inflict gaping wounds for twice as long, which means you just have a more powerful attack there as well. Overall, it's probably not 100% necessary to the build. If you would rather take ability score improvements, you absolutely can. It's entirely up to you. Now, at this point, I would say if you're done with the fighter stuff, obviously we go back to wizard now. But obviously you may be thinking, well, we're getting our wizard subclass now. Doesn't that feel a little bit late? I guess that's true. I would say at any point after level 5 or 6 of fighter, you can go back to wizard for the rest of the levels that you would be taking here. But otherwise, don't worry about it too much. You can kind of start with 2 levels of wizard as well if you really want to focus on the alchemy system, which I actually do personally recommend if you don't mind delaying some of the Arcane Archer stuff. It's entirely up to you what you kind of want to do there. But otherwise, I do think it's fine that if you want to just take all the fighter levels and get this stuff later and just start hucking grenades with all of the, alchemy supplies that you've gathered up over the course of Acts 1 and 2. But anyways, with this level 2 of Wizard, we are going to be able to grab our subclass, which is going to be Transmutation Wizard, giving us access to experimental alchemy. You can brew 2 alchemical solutions instead of 1 when combining extracts, if you succeed a DC 15 medicine check. There it is, right on the tin. We've got medicine proficiency and a decent wisdom score, so overall, that's not too bad. We're also going to be able to grab 2 more spells at this level, and at this point, let's grab Ice Knife to make another kind of special ranged shot, allowing us to deal 1d10 piercing and 2d6 cold damage and spreading ice over an area. Overall, I think it's pretty cool. We're also going to be able to grab something else, and honestly, I would say Ray of Sickness, giving us a Poison Ray ranged attack, allowing us to possibly poison targets and deal 2d8 poison damage. And then you can kind of mess around with your spell selection here. At level 3 of Wizard, we're going to gain access to level 2 spells, and 2 of which that I immediately want to grab are Scorching Ray and Melf's Acid Arrow. Scorching Ray is another ranged attack, allowing us to hurl 3 rays of fire, spreading out 66 fire damage over 3 potential targets. We also have Melf's Acid Arrow, allowing us to do 4d4 acid damage, and at the end of the target's turn, they'll take an additional 2d4 acid damage. And again, it's literally an arrow, so it feels like it makes sense. And we also do get to prepare these spells. I would say let's go for something that looks a little bit like this. And finally, for Wizard level 4, we are going to get to pick up another cantrip. Honestly, pick your favourite. I'll go with Bone Chill. We're also going to be able to grab 2 more spells, and I like grabbing Misty Step for the ability to get where we need to go when it comes to setting up for ranged combat. I think your last one can kind of be whatever you want. If you wanted to pick up the Eversight Ring for this build to make yourself immune to being blind, you can grab Darkness at this level, allowing you to sit in a cloud of darkness and fire out arrows without people being able to hit you back, which will honestly be very, very effective. I would say let's go for a setup like this for now. We're also going to get our final feat of the build, in which case I'm going to say let's bump up our intelligence to make both our arcane shots and our spellcasting with Wizard a bit better. And that is the build. Overall, what you're going to be getting out of this is a little bit of everything when it comes to magic, when it comes to low-level magic, let's say. You're going to get all the good utility stuff for traversing the map and all the good stuff that it feels to that's all the stuff that feels good to have while you are playing as a wizard. Also, you're going to get some of the basic lower-level spells for like some good shot types. And again, the main thing that we're getting from Wizard is that transmutation magic, which allows us to make better use of the alchemy system for things like grenades, potions, and all that good stuff. Like, honestly, I think people really do undervalue the alchemy system in this game. I genuinely think it's a great side objective, both for roleplay and mechanical value, because being able to make all these potions, and it gives you, like, an excuse to explore and do all this other stuff, I think it makes a lot of sense. And again, for this kind of path that we've taken with Gale in his kind of story, I do like it here. Although I will do that Shadow Sorcerer Gale in the future, for sure. But of course, the main draw here is Arcane Archer, giving us access to these special, extremely powerful ranged attacks, each with various different effects, all based on the schools of magic, which in my opinion fits in line with Gale. And overall, I think it is quite a powerful skill set. Again, you're not really a frontline combatant, you're kind of a mid to long range combatant who can do a lot of damage. And overall, you will feel like an effective member of the team, but I do think the only issue that this build is going to have is kind of balancing the wizard and fighter levels. I would say you definitely want those 2 levels of wizard as early as you can get them. I think my overall leveling scheme would be start with wizard, go 6 levels of fighter, take another 1 level dip of wizard for the transmutation stuff, then do 2 more levels of fighter to get to level 8 and get that feat, then do 2 more levels of wizard to get the final feat and those extra spells. I think that's basically how I would work it, but you may be thinking, wow, for a Gale build we're really skimping out on the spellcasting here. But don't worry, we've got items for that. Let's talk about that now. So, first up, our ranged weapons of choice, and like I say, as always, because we are running dual crossbows, there's only really 2 options. First up is the Hellfire Hand Crossbow, allowing you to possibly inflict burning while hitting a creature with this weapon while hiding or invisible. That's not exactly relevant for us here. But what is relevant is it is one of the two hand crossbows in the game that come with a +2 weapon enchantment, and this also gives us Scorching Ray Shot. Once per short rest, we can fire off a level 3 Scorching Ray, hurling 4 rays of fire and spreading out that 8d6 damage. So there you go, another special shot type, as well as being able to gain more spellcasting, which feels pretty damn good. We're also going to be grabbing the Near Misser, the crossbow that does pure force damage and gives us a level 3 casting of Magic Missile once per short rest. There you go, even more spellcasting, and of course both of these work with our Magic Arrow feature, allowing us to overcome resistance. Very, very nice. But what actually makes this build a bit more of a spellcaster is our quarterstaff and our shield. Of course, for my endgame quarterstaff, I've gone with the Marker Heshkir, allowing us to gain a +1 bonus to spell save DC and spell attack rolls, because believe it or not, spell save DC does affect our arrows. So any buffs that give us an additional bit of spell save DC are going to help the build overall, so we've got the Marker Heshkir here. This also comes with Arcane Battery, meaning that we can cast a spell without spending a spell slot, which is nice, but we don't exactly have those high-level spells. But it is a +2 weapon overall, so you can bonk people if you need to, but the main thing here is Kareska's Favor, allowing us to imbue ourselves with elemental energy sourced from the draconic goddess Kareska. Again, a Gale with slightly more stunted magic relying on equipment, gaining his biggest spells from a legendary staff, honestly makes sense to me. We get a bunch of different elements here: fire, thunder, acid, poison, and lightning that we can pick from, as well as cold, and that will give us new spells as well as a status effect on that we can inflict related to those spell damage types. For us, we're going to be choosing lightning with this build to gain lightning charges. For those of you that don't know, I can go over here and explain it. With the Spell Sparkler, our early game choice, which allows you to, whenever the wielder deals damage with a spell or a cantrip, they gain 2 lightning charges. So what happens is, lightning charges basically mean that whenever we have them, we gain a +1 to attack rolls and deal an additional 1 lightning damage. That attack roll will help offset the Sharpshooter weapon penalty, as well as giving us additional lightning damage. That lightning damage is a damage rider, meaning that any additional damage that we do from any of our attacks, including the extra psychic, force, necrotic, what have you, from lightning charges, from the arcane shots, I should say, will carry over to lightning charges, meaning that all of that will do additional lightning damage. So, for example, you may think, well, 1 lightning damage isn't a lot, but technically, it's 3 extra lightning damage because of those extra attacks that we're doing. It's pretty interesting. As well as the fact that once we gain 5 charges, they are consumed, and the next time we deal damage, we do a big 1d8 damage of lightning. So overall, it's pretty cool, but as you can see, for both the Marker Heshkir and the Spell Sparkler, we only gain these lightning charges when we cast a spell, or a cantrip, which is why we have things like Firebolt, Magic Missile, Mel's Acid Arrow. We cast these spells of our action, then use our offhand weapon attack with our, dual wielding here, to be able to take advantage of those lightning charges on our weapon attacks. And of course, our spells do also benefit from the extra lightning damage as well, so it's all good. So yeah, with all of that together, we actually have a pretty solid blend of, lightning damage added to all of our attacks. We can do spells, we can do ranged attacks, and it all blends together. The best thing about the Marker Heshkir, again, is it is going to give you 2 of those high-level spells. The Lightning variant giving us a highly upcast version of Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning, which are both very, very powerful. But of course, feel free to play around with the other status effects like Heat, Reverberation, I believe there's also Noxious Fumes and such like that, and even Encrusted with Frost. So feel free to play around with it. You can kind of play with different elements and gain different spells. I know you can get things like Destructive Wave and Fireball and Flame Strike. It's all really, really cool. So I actually think the Marker Heshkir giving you a lot to work with, and you can change the element every short rest. I don't know, it just feels very, very fun. So feel free to play around with this and kind of see how this part of the build can kind of be elevated with this arcane staff giving you all these different spells and status effects that can affect your ranged weapon attacks of Arcane Archer. I don't know, it just felt like a cool piece of synergy. The only disappointing thing I would say about this is in both the case of the Spell Sparkler and the Marker Heshkir is that the arcane shots do not count as spells despite using our spell save DC, so they will not give us things like lightning charges, which is a bit of a shame, but again, we can weave our spells into this build pretty goddamn easy, and even our Scorching Ray shot, as well as our Magic Missile from the crossbows that we have, they will give us lightning charges. So, I don't know, you kind of, again, you will have to play around with it and see if the flow feels right for you, but in my personal opinion, I do think it is very effective, and through my testing, I found it to work really well. So there you go, long rant out of the way, that's my justification for all of that. Moving on, because we do have levels in Fighter and are playing as a human, we do gain shield proficiency, and since we're mainly going to have our crossbows out and won't even really see the shield that much, we might as well just have one on here. The Shield of Devotion will give us an extra level 1 spell slot, which is nice because our spell slots are somewhat limited, as well as we have Shield of Devotion Aid giving us an extra 10 hit points. So while we're sitting at 90 here just at base, we can cast this for free at the start of every long rest and make that a nice rounded out 100. In addition to this, we can also cast Mage Armour. We can turn Gale back around because he's a what name who decided to do that. There we go. And now we're sitting at a very comfortable 20 AC with 100 HP, which for someone who has levels in Wizard feels quite nice. Alright, let's have a look at the equipment. First up, our headpiece, and you got a few options here. I went with the Mask of Soul Perception to give us a +2 bonus to attack rolls, initiative rolls, and perception checks. With our 18 in dexterity, this means that we're pretty much going to be already offsetting the penalty from Sharpshooter quite nicely, allowing us to move first in combat to allow us to get set up, and perception checks to prevent us from being surprised, as well as detect thoughts. In the earlier game, you can go with the Marksmanship hat to give you a +1 bonus to your ranged attack rolls to offset the Sharpshooter penalty in a slightly less effective way, or also giving you a Cowboy hat, so you know. That already gets it a lot of points. But also, we have the Helmet of Arcane Acuity. Now, I did show this off on my other two builds, but I do think I need to bring it up here, even though I'm not expressly recommending it for this build, but because it does work, but I don't like to have overlapping equipment in my Origin builds if I can help it. But the Helmet of Arcane Acuity is obviously very good, because every time we hit with a weapon attack, we gain Arcane Acuity, which increases our spell save DC. That is going to affect both our Arcane shots and our wizard spells, so overall might be worth bringing this one, but otherwise it's not 100% necessary for the build. I didn't use it in any of my testing, so it's not required, and this build will still be very effective. No cloak today, but feel free to throw on any cloak that you like that you think would be nice, but I didn't want to put it on because I like the fashion without the cloak. I actually think this fits Gale very, very well. Speaking of, we've got the Protecty Sparkwall as our cloak of choice, giving us a +1 bonus to spell save DC, amazing, and as long as we have lightning charges, we gain a +1 bonus to armor class and saving throws, meaning that while we have lightning charges, we have an AC of 21, which is very, very good. Not to mention, this robe was literally designed for Gale, because look at it, it's got its color scheme, it's got this amazing kind of like version, like its design looks like an upgraded version of his base robe. It honestly looks really, really cool, which is why I wanted to showcase it on this build. I just love the color scheme of it too, so that's why none of this has died, because I actually think this all looks pretty good just as is. So yeah, I think it fits Gale pretty well, but obviously, and you can get this in the early game as well, but obviously once you get to the end game, you can throw on any of the typical high level robes that you would normally like to wear, and those will work just fine. Cloak of the Weave obviously exists. Moving on, the Gloves of the Automaton. This is kind of another way to get that sort of artificery feel with this build, which is kind of what I was going for. The Gloves of the Automaton will allow you to activate Circuitry Interface once per short rest as a bonus action, and for the next 10 turns you are considered a construct, which is slightly counterintuitive to this build, as it means you cannot benefit from healing magic or potions, but everything else will be just fine. But it makes it so your weapon attack rolls have advantage, and you gain resistance to lightning damage. So for 10 turns, all of our attack rolls have advantage. Well, that's Sharpshooter dealt with right then and there. And honestly, the effect that it gives us is really, really cool, and it honestly fits the vibe of the build really well. So I wanted to include these here, but you can swap these out for something else if you so desire. Finally, for the boots, we've just got the evasive shoes here to give us another point in armor class to round it out to that nice even 20, like I said. For our accessories, there wasn't really an amulet that I thought worked on this build, and I knew I wasn't going to use the Amulet of the Devout on the eventual Shadowheart Death Cleric build, so I've decided to use it here, giving us another +2 bonus to our spell save DC, again helping with both our arcane shots and our wizard spells. Moving on to the rings. These are both rings I would say you can kind of change out if you like, but the first one we have is the Poisonous Ring, allowing us to attack our enemies with a new kind of spell once per long rest that makes them vulnerable to poison damage if they weren't already immune, for 10 turns, and this can target up to 3 targets. Obviously, combining this with our Poison Arrow means that 2d6 damage just got doubled, which can be very, very effective. So I do recommend this ring, but I can obviously see why you would want to swap it out, so feel free to change it up for something else. I would honestly say the Ring of Arcane Synergy, even though I already used it on my Will build, would absolutely work well here, because obviously that extra damage from our spellcasting ability modifier would apply to our, arcane arrows for a lot of extra damage. Also, since this is a Gale Origin build, we can make use of Gale's Origin Ring, the Ring of Evasion, allowing you to, whenever you fail a dexterity throw, you can spend a reaction to succeed it instead. Yeah, that's it. There's no limit on that. As long as you have a reaction, you can just do that every turn. It's kind of busted. But of course, you can only get it if you play as Gale as an Origin. If you have Gale as a companion, you won't have access to this. So you might have to change this one out. But anytime I do a Gale build, I always like to bring up the Ring of Evasion because, well, I never get to use it otherwise. So yeah, that is a potential option for you as well. So yeah, that is the build, and overall, what do I think? Well, I think it's an interesting different direction for Gale. I mean, I have done Wizard and Sorcerer builds for Gale more times than I can count. I've done Conjuration Wizard for summoning, I've done Wild Magic Sorcerer, I've done other Wizard builds, I've done a Transmutation Wizard build with him before, but that was mixed with Barbarian, that was for Halloween. Like, I wanted to do something a bit different, and I took a look at Arcane Archer, and the more that I thought about it, the more I just couldn't escape from the idea that I think it fits Gale. Yes, you gotta do a little bit of like squinting of your eyes when you're looking at his backstory and lore to really feel like it works, but again, I feel like with such the intense connection that it has to Wizard, that being Arcane Archer, I just felt like it made sense. I will say the level progression on this one can be a little bit funky with making sure that you get everything you want when you want it, and I'll be honest, you could go for a 10-2 split if you'd rather go to level 10 of Arcane Archer and you don't really care about that extra feat. Maybe you're dropping Crossbow Expert and just going for more ability score improvements. That's totally up to you. There is definitely wiggle room on this build for you to decide what you want to do with it. So overall, pick your poison, kind of mess around with the leveling scheme on this one, but I definitely think the kind of the flavoring and mechanical theme that we've gone for here, with being able to use the specialized arrows that you can find throughout the game from various vendors, being able to craft potions and grenades, and then mixing that with our, transmutation feature as well as the arcane shots, you're going to feel like kind of like an artificer in a way. It's a shame we don't get things like the artificer infusions here, but hey, that's just life. But overall, I really do like this build. I think all of the features synergize together nicely. I think the equipment helps elevate the build in an interesting way. I think you've got a lot to work with there in terms of being able to use Kareska's favor to be able to give you those high-level spells anyway. And at the end of the day, if you really want to make this all about Gale desperately trying to gain his magic favor back, this could be a reason for him to go down the Karsus route and again, pick up all of the spell scrolls you can throughout the game. Because of our high, spell modifier, we're still going to be able to make great use of those scrolls. So I can see Gale just running around hoarding, scrolls, arrows, grenades, his arcane arrows, like all that sort of thing. Like, I actually think it's a really interesting direction for him to go down. He is a crafty guy. I mean, hell, he likes to cook. So I just think it's a different direction for the character that's not too out of the realm of possibility for the game. And overall, I think that kind of progression that you'll feel throughout the game, because at the end of the day, for the most part, you are just playing a straight fighter, which means the level progression is going to feel good. You just might feel like you're not getting that wizardy element as early on as you would like. So, overall, entirely up to you. I definitely feel like Arcane Archer was definitely one of the weirdest subclasses to try and fit into this Origin build series lineup, but everything else I think is going to make a lot of sense, and I think you guys are going to like what I do with the rest of the subclasses, because I know there are going to be people who look at this video and just think, what the hell are you doing, man? But anyways, that is going to do it for me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.